What's your take on the Sino-Russian relations? And is it possible for our two great countries to form an alliance, a strategic alliance in the face of American aggression? Because recently, the Department of Defense just announced Russia and China are the main competitor, and even enemies to American influence around the world. My second question is, why the Russian liberal class has such hostility toward we Chinese? As we know, China has already become the largest investor, the largest trading partner of Russia. I mean, I'm very happy to see President Xi Jinping and Putin met many times. And your President Putin is very popular in China. And we call him Putin the Great. And also, Ms. Putin has bought many ice cream to China, and the Russian ice cream is very popular in China.
I think she's got the question.
And so, I also want to know.
Well, I think you've asked several questions. They're good questions. I think we'll let Ms. Sobchak answer them.
Well, I didn't get actually all of that. I'm sorry for my English because, it's...
Prospects for alliance between Russia and China in the face of American aggression, and why does the Russian middle class hate the Chinese? I think we can leave it with that.
Okay. So,
yes,
first,
Putin is popular in China, but...
Actually, this was my point because I have lots of meetings here. And that actually is my point that I wanted to make on some other meeting, but I'm eager to share it now too. There is actually a point in what you were making about this connection with Putin against anti-Americanism. One thing you should understand, that by putting more and more sanctions on Russia, pressing harder on Putin, not someone, but also you in America and you in Europe make Putin a leader of anti-Americanism movement in the world. And this is not good at all. And this question you ask is actually, this is a huge position all around the world. Many countries I come to as a journalist, people say, yes, we support Putin. I said, why? How the hell can you support Putin living, I don't know, in Italy, somewhere in a province, or in China, or so? Because he's anti-American. He's a leader of anti-American movement. And this is how Americans make him feel. It's not us who think of him like that. But by pressing him, by making him a hero, suppressing those sanctions and fighting with those sanctions, many other countries,
developing world.
Developing countries, big countries, they're uniting with Putin because they feel his strength and they have anti-American attitudes, and you only make his power bigger. And this also is a very important case I want everyone to understand here in America. So I don't want this to happen, and I don't like this idea. And I don't think we should fight with America. I think we should be part, we Russians, we are part of European civilization. We're the biggest European country, and this is who we are. And here, I think there is a difference with the Chinese way. Your economy is very strong, you have another way of developing, but we're different in this respect, which is not bad. We can still have connections, we can have economical alliances, but we're just different in our perspective and movement towards other countries. About second case, I wouldn't say middle-class people hate China people. It's not true. What I can say, which is true, what is the most fashionable and up-to-date way of bringing children in big cities in Russia now? All my friends who have children, even I'm starting thinking about this for my little child too, are searching for good Chinese teachers, because they all want their children to study Chinese. Why? Because they say, there's a huge opportunity that one day, some people in Russia would need Chinese language, because, Chinese is a big country on the borders of Russia. Many Chinese people with time can come to Russia in these or other ways. So this is a reality in which we live in. Everyone wants to learn Chinese. Everyone knows that one time it's a joke, but still people joke with each other, you know. What can happen? I have a little baby, but maybe in the time he will grow up, we will be a part of China. So let him study Chinese right now. So you should understand this is the reality we live in. So no hatred, it's just the reality. You're huge, you're strong, you're economically very strong. And of course, with such a huge population on our borders, where we have a very small population in Siberia, there are some threats that many Russians think about. This is just fact.
Okay.
Thank you. So shortly about the points on Crimea and Donbass. First of all, I think all the support of the Donbass from the Russian side should be finished immediately. So all the forces that are there pretending to be volunteers should be removed from Donbass. And as soon as the support of Russia to Donbass will be ended, the conflict there will be ended. I'm quite sure in this. So it's only artificially made conflict with Russian side. This is number one. About Crimea, we really broke the international treaty on taking the Crimea and making it part of Russia. But now we cannot solve the situation only by giving it back, because it's really Russian people living there, 2 million of Russian people that really support Crimea being a part of Russia. And we should take this in account. This is people who live there. And now, to solve the situation, the only thing I see is an international referendum, including all the people living in Ukraine and all the people living in Russia, voting all together on the status of Crimea. And the 3 questions put to referendum there. Should Crimea be independent? Should Crimea be part of Russia? Should Crimea be part of Ukraine? Only this kind of international referendum with international worldwide vigilance of this referendum can be some sort of a compromise in this harsh situation we're now put ourselves into.
Thank you. My name is Mike. I'm from Johns Hopkins. I'd like to return to your answer on Crimea, which frankly was the only part of your otherwise inspiring performance that left me really disappointed. Look, the Russian Federation has 3 times the population of Ukraine. Even forgetting about the persecution of people who were against the illegal annexation, persecution of the Crimean Tatars, even forgetting about that, if one follows your logic, with a 3-to-1 advantage in the Russian Federation, you know how the vote's going to be. Let me just put it to you this way. I've been trying to think of what a counterfactual would be. Suppose the Chinese, who are moving into the Far Eastern province peacefully as traders and marrying Russians and all that, suppose in a few years they decide that they're going to make a grab on a relatively small part of the Far Eastern maritime province. And then they pump in money to develop it, and then they meanwhile persecute the people who are against the illegal land grab. Would you be in favor of a situation where you then have a referendum in the Russian Federation and in China to see if the people who are people, and incidentally, they would have had a claim according to the Nerchinsk Treaty of 1683, so the parallel with 1954 is even there. Would you be in favor of, I mean, doesn't that strike you as a little silly when you think about it?
Thank you for your question. Look, I don't think it's a good example, because Crimea, maybe you just don't know that, but historically, it was a part of Russia. Crimea was Russia for many, many years, since Catherine the Great. So it's not China coming for some territory, you know. We should understand that Crimea was part of Russia for many, many centuries. Then, during the collapse of Soviet Union, we agreed that this part of territory would belong to Ukraine. But it was still Russian population, Russian people, not Ukrainians, living there. So it was a treaty signed between our countries, but within this treaty, it was still huge Russian population living there. So then we divided like this. Then all those Maidan revolutions in Ukraine started. We became an aggressor and did what Russia did, which I don't support. And I think that was a wrongdoing. I think we did something wrong. And this, I must say, maybe also you don't understand, for Russians, it's a boo act. When I say in a Russian auditory, Crimea, by international law, is Ukrainian, everyone starts bullying because, like, this is really not a fake poll. 90% of Russians agree and like the idea that the Crimea is Russian. This we should also understand. And people in Crimea, they like the idea of being part of Russia. As a journalist with my colleague who is also here, he's a witness of that. As journalists, we went to Crimea to make a reportage on what's going on during the elections, and stating that there were many military Russian people, so-called green men from Russia, who were not militants de facto, but they were. At the same time, we had to say, as journalists, as doing this report, that people really supported that. Many, many Russians put to their windows stickers, "We want to be part of Russia," because they are Russians and not Ukrainians. And in this conflict, they wanted to be with Russia. So now we cannot just, bring them back. It's not a decision. It's not a compromise. A compromise is a referendum of both countries. This is the only compromise we can think of in a bad situation. If you ask me if we did the right thing, of course, no. I would never do that if I would be a president at the moment, but I was not. So the only thing we can do now is do something with this messed up situation.
Would you like to say?
Actually, not. No,
Hi,
actually,
Peter
I'm not the
Semler
woman
with
behind
Capital
you.
Intelligence. I was with your
But
father in the
what's got to do?
August coup
That's
in
fine.
Leningrad, and I saw him liberate the freedom of the Baltics. That was decided between Boris Yeltsin, and President Putin began as an office manager for a U.S. law firm in Leningrad, Shapiro Dickstein. He became the international relations of the city of Leningrad, and then he became your father's deputy mayor. And then we know the economic recovery. Are you going to use your campaign to remind Putin how far backwards he came from his start, from being on the right side of the coup against the KGB, the freedom of Russia, and then bringing the economic miracle, getting Russia out of its economic disaster under Yeltsin? He brought the economy back. He liberalized. He was a liberal. He was a Democrat. And now we come to this point where we're facing a lot of things that are in trouble. The regions are hurting. There's no jobs. You've lost $1 trillion or so far in GDP because of the sanctions. Is this going to be your message to the President Putin during your campaign?
Exactly. I just word in word repeating one of my presidential campaign videos. So this is what actually I'm going to say, that he really changed to worse the situation in Russia, and that he really started being with real Democrats in the 90s, choosing his way with democratic leaders, but then during those years he brings us back to Soviet Union. This is what he does, and in this way he just, all the values that were important in the 90s for my father and for people who were at that time, the people who changed the situation in Russia. He changed his values.